So I promised you a longer form video where I would go into more detail explaining about why the three keys to living without money are stewardship of your gifts, sincere service to others, and surrender of the outcome. If you take away any of these things, you can't do it. You won't be able to do it. It'll be too hard a journey. So I'm going to start with explaining the reason stewardship is so important. It's that there's nobody that God left out of the pot, right? He gave talents and gifts to every single person. And if he didn't give you talents and gifts, he gave you something material that you can use to share with others. Now, he didn't give you everything because he wants us to live in communion and in community with one another. And that means that we all need to bring something to the table, but we also need to bring needs that other people can fill. So you're never going to have the complete picture of what you need all by yourself. And that's not by accident, that's by design. It's just like your weaknesses are not accidental, they're intentional. You are born with weaknesses so that you will need other people's strengths. You are born with strengths so that other people will need them because it covers their weaknesses. There's no blame and no shame in having strengths, and there's no blame and no shame in having weaknesses. But we have to recognize that the purpose of those things is to connect us together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, if you will. We all bring something to the table that the others don't, and we all need to connect together for the picture to be whole. So Jesus talks a lot about stewardship, and one of his clearest is the parable of the 10 talents. So this is in Matthew, and it starts with chapter 25, verse 14. So it was with a man who went on his travels. He called his trusted servants to him and committed his money to their charge. He gave 5 talents to one, 2 to another, and 1 to another, according to their several abilities. And with that, he set out on his journey. The man who received 5 talents went and traded with them until he had made a profit of 5 talents more. And in the same way, he who had received 2 made a profit of 2. Whereas he who had received but 1 went off and made a hole in the ground, and there hid his master's money. So out of fear, this third man is allowing fear to guide him. And so instead of using what God gave him, he's burying it. And a lot of times that's what keeps us in poverty. That instead of leveraging what God's given us for the benefit of others and thus multiplying our talents, we're burying them. We're hiding them. We're not letting other people know about them. And why are we doing that? Because it takes risk. It takes vulnerability. It takes courage to open up and share with other people, because what if people don't like it? What if people don't receive it well? What if people reject it? That's our fear, right? And so it can turn out that instead of leveraging our gifts and talents for our benefit, we end up burying them, and they benefit nobody, including God. So long afterwards, the master of those servants came back and entered into a reckoning with them. So he's going to count up what they've done with what he gave them. And so the man who had received 5 talents came forward and brought him 5 talents more. Lord, he said, it was 5 talents thou gavest me. See how I've made a profit of 5 talents beside. And his master said to him, Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since thou hast been faithful over little things, I have great things to commit to thy charge. Come and share the joy of thy Lord. Then came the man who had received 2 talents. Lord, he said, it was 2 talents thou gavest me. See how I have made a profit of 2 talents beside. And his master said to him, Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since thou hast been faithful over little things, I have great things to commit to thy charge. Come and share the joy of thy Lord. But when he who had received but 1 talent came forward in his turn, he said, Lord, knowing thee for a hard man that reaps where he did not sow and gathers in from fields he had never planted, I took fright and so went off and hid thy talent in the earth. See now, thou hast received what is thine. And his Lord answered him, You base and slothful servant, thou knewest well that I reap where I did not sow and gather in from fields I never planted. And all the more it was thy part to lodge my money with the bankers, so that I might have recovered it with interest when I came. He's like, look, why didn't you at least put it in a bank where I could gain interest if you were afraid of losing it? Now take the talent away from him and give it to him who has 10 talents already. Whenever a man is rich, gifts will be made to him, and his riches will abound. If he is poor, even what he accounts his own will be taken from him. Now, this sounds kind of twisted, right? It sounds like God saying, you poor people, get away from me because you don't have anything to return to me. And that's not really the message. It's a message you could receive, but it's not really the message. The message is that our talents, our gifts and talents, literally, are meant to be invested in other people so that the people may grow in strength. The people may grow in value to the Lord by helping one another, by spreading his word, by setting an example of what it means to live in faith with him. And when we don't do that, when we hoard our gifts, when we hold back from giving, when we choose not to be generous with what God has so generously provided to us, then we rob everyone of the benefit that God intended them to receive. And like I said, a lot of our holding back can be due to fear of rejection or ridicule or scorn. And those things are very real. When you step out on the internet to share, believe me, people aren't always kind. People aren't always nice. And that's a reality. You may share your gift and they may not receive it well. I recently spent weeks coming up with a gift for a person that I hoped would benefit and bless their life. And instead of receiving the gift the way I hoped they would, and putting it to work for them and for my benefit and for God's benefit, instead they picked it apart because it didn't fit their expectation of what it should look like. So they're going to be getting a different gift. But I use that as an example. Giving requires us to be vulnerable, which is very difficult to do. It requires us to open up, take risks of rejection, of ridicule, of judgment, even of misunderstanding about our intentions. We can be wholly intending to do right by somebody, wholly intending to be a blessing to them, and they may in turn see it as an extra burden being added to their shoulders. They may choose to reject the gift because they don't think they have the capacity to put it to use. So this is part of where surrender comes in, right? When we step up to serve others with our gift, we have to surrender that outcome. We don't get to choose what they're going to do with it. All we get to choose is what we're going to do. So stewardship is that first part, stepping up to share our gifts in the face of potential rejection, judgment, ridicule, all of that. And being courageous and bold enough to say, I have something beautiful, I'm going to offer it to the world. The second part of that is the sincere service without intention for gain. Now, that's counterintuitive. You're like, well, I want certain things in life, and if I put my service out there and it's not appreciated or not returned, or I don't get what I want out of it, how does that help me? And I was in that position. So I'm going to tell you a story about how God taught me to see the value of service without expectation of receipt in return. It started with a retreat, a discernment retreat. I wanted to be in a position of spiritual leadership, and this is how God showed me that I wasn't really ready for that position. And we were reading scripture, and I'll come over here to it. And it's Luke, I think it's chapter 5 is where it started. It happened that he, Jesus, was standing by the lake of Gennesareth at a time when the multitude was pressing close about him to hear the word of God. And he saw 2 boats moored at the edge of the lake. The fishermen had gone ashore and were washing their nets. And he went on board one of the boats, which belonged to Simon, and asked him to stand off a little from the land. And so sitting down, he began to teach the multitudes from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Stand out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." And you can kind of hear, I want you to picture this, right? Poor Simon. He's been out there all night trying to catch fish to feed his family, trying with everything he's got to provide for the people he loves. He is exhausted. He has caught nothing. I am sure the word discouraged enters the picture, and demoralized, maybe even. Who knows? Maybe this was not the first night where he'd caught nothing, right? But he's out there. He's been out there all night. Now he's having to wash those empty nets and prepare them for the next day. And he's tired. He's just bone deep tired. And God comes up to him and says, "Oh yeah, by the way, I know you're busy, but would you take a pause?" If Jesus doesn't even ask for permission, he gets into Peter's boat. And I thought that detail was very odd. It led me to ask, why would Jesus do that? I mean, that seems so strange for a perfect stranger to just up and get into somebody's boat, you know? So, and we'll get to that in a moment, but I'm gonna continue on here for a moment. So Simon, who is just so exhausted, he's just barely cleaning off his nets. Jesus is getting into his boat and saying, "Push off to shore. Go a little way off." So Simon's like, fine, whatever, dude. And he goes out from shore and he's listening as Jesus is speaking. Then Jesus tells him, "Go out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And you can hear the exhaustion and the frustration and the discouragement in Simon's answer. "Master, we have toiled all the night and caught nothing." Okay? And then he catches himself and he says, "But at thy word, I will let down the net." He's like, "Dude, if you say so, I'll do this. But man, I am tired." And when they had done this, they took a great quantity of fish, so that the net was near breaking. And they had to beg into their partners who were in the other boat to come and help them. That's how many fish were coming in. It was just this, well, literally boatload and plus, and then some, of fish. And so it's near to breaking. They had to come get their partners. And when they filled both boats, the fish were causing it to almost sink. Just, you can only imagine. Now, if it had been me in that boat, I'm sure what I would have been thinking in that moment was, hooray, I'm going to be wealthy. I'm never going to have to work again. I can sell all these fish and live till retirement age, right? And at seeing this, Simon Peter fell down and caught Jesus by the knees and said, "Leave me to myself, Lord. I am a sinner." And such amazement overcame both him and all his crew at the catch of fish they made. So it was too with James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were Simon's partners. But Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid." He doesn't say go off and live your life in peace. You're going to be rich now. "Henceforth, you shall be a fisher of men." So he's not going to stop fishing. Now that he's learned how to catch this abundance of fish by doing whatever the Lord tells him to do, no, now it's his job to go catch men. And so I knew God was calling me to that same vocation. I was to be a catcher of men, not in the same way as Simon and Peter and all the others. Women are not called to the priesthood. Priesthood is a father's vocation, and I'm a mother, so I can't do that. But I can catch people in other ways, right? So now I go back and I'm curious. I take a look. What inspired Jesus to A, pick Simon, and B, just feel like he could boldly step into Simon's boat without asking permission? And this is where the story gets really interesting, because you have to understand Jewish law for this to unfold for you in a proper way, right? So Jesus comes back to Galilee, and the power of the Spirit was upon him. Word went around through all the neighboring country, and he began to preach in their synagogues, so that his praise was on all men's lips. All right. So Galilee has been hearing about him all this time, and now we come down here to Capernaum, which is a city in Galilee. and began teaching them there on the Sabbath, and they were amazed by his teaching. Such was the authority by which he spoke. He casts out this unclean spirit, and here's where Simon enters the picture, right? And he rose up and left the synagogue, and I'm sure after he cast out this unclean spirit must have been when Simon came to him, because he rose up and left the synagogue and went into Simon's house. Why did he do that? The mother of Simon's wife was in the grip of a violent fever. Do we see anything about Simon's wife herself? Simon's wife didn't speak. We don't hear from her at all. We don't even see her. But the mother of Simon's wife was in the grip of a violent fever, and they entreated his aid for her. He stood over her and checked the fever so that it left her. All at once she rose and ministered to them. And the sun was going down. All those who had friends afflicted with disease of any kind brought them to him. So here we learn something important about Simon. Now, we don't see anything about Simon's wife except that it was the mother of Simon's wife. Now, this is really important, because if Simon's wife was dead at this point, which I believe she was, that means that Simon has taken this woman that he did not have any obligation to care for. If she had sons, it would have been their obligation to care for her. This meant that probably Simon's wife was an only child, and his mother-in-law was without sons, which meant that she was at risk of being abandoned. Being a widow in that time was bad news for a woman, especially if you didn't have sons. If you didn't have sons, there was nobody to care for you. The sons-in-law, the men who married your daughters, were not obligated to do that. They didn't have any obligation to her. And Simon himself did not have any obligation, yet he was taking care of her, and so committed to taking care of her that he had come to get Jesus to bring him to her, because he saw that Jesus could heal. He saw that Jesus could cast out unclean spirits, and he had hope that maybe Jesus could heal his mother-in-law. And sure enough, he does. And not just heals her a little bit. Man, she is so healed that the minute that he's done speaking over her, she's back up serving everybody, which is quite important. And so the next day when he comes across Simon and gets into Simon's boat, Simon doesn't hesitate to help him, because Jesus worked a miracle for his mother-in-law. He doesn't care that this guy got into his boat. And I think it says a lot that Jesus picked Simon's boat. It was Simon's act of service to his mother-in-law that told Jesus about the kind of man that Simon was, about the leadership that Simon showed, right? And so that act of service led Jesus to choose Simon for a leadership position. And this is something I want you to understand about sincere service to others with no intention of further gain. When you do that, you are stepping into a position of leadership. 80% of people in any given room are there to get something. They are not there to give anything. Most likely 80% of people watching this video are trying to get something for themselves. They're not there to give anything. And I'm okay with that. I understand that, because I've been in that place. And in fact, going back to my story, and the reason I'm telling this is so I got to this point where I kind of saw why Jesus chose Simon. It was that heart for service, that heart of a servant leader that Jesus really honed in on. And, then I understood that Jesus was calling me to be that kind of servant leader. He wanted me, and I understood this, to take the lessons of entrepreneurship that I'd learned along the way from his hand and set his people free from their captivity by sharing those lessons, so that not only were they equipped for entrepreneurship, but they could be equipped for evangelization at the same time, because the two are quite closely linked. If you can sell anything, you can sell Jesus. Not that you need to sell Jesus, but you learn how to overcome objections, you learn how to anticipate, you learn how to show the value of a thing. All of those lessons are entrepreneurship lessons. The two are quite closely linked. And what the church has more than anything is a PR and marketing problem. not a product problem. Jesus is perfect. Jesus is the answer to every need we have. We stink at marketing and promoting it. But at any rate, so I understood that God wanted me to do this, and he wanted me to do this without charge. And I went home and I boo-hooed, sobbed my way through the whole thing, picked up the rosary and was praying the sorrowful mysteries, and I'm getting through the agony in the garden where Jesus is surrendering everything, preparing himself to surrender his everything that matters to him in order to serve humanity. And he knows that the service that he's going to perform is not going to be valued and appreciated up front. In fact, many people along the way are going to reject that service. They're going to misinterpret that service, and they're going to ultimately crucify him for that service, which is, everything we face when we step out to serve. And then I'm still boo-hooing. I'm crying my way through the scourging at the pillar where Jesus is accepting the lashes that he didn't deserve for a crime he didn't even commit, all because he wanted to help people. And I'm coming to the crowning with thorns where he gets ridiculed and mocked and scorned, all for wanting to help people, and then the carrying of the cross, which is all that rejection and all that humiliation and all the weight of all that just awfulness that was given to him. And then I came to the fifth mystery. And that's the crucifixion. That's the moment where Jesus is dying up on that cross. And I put myself in Simon Peter's shoes. Simon, who had given up everything, who had immediately left his boat, his livelihood, his home to follow after Jesus, believing with all of his heart and all of his might that Jesus was the Messiah, that his kingdom would come, that Peter would have a place in it, that he would go from being an unappreciated, undervalued fisherman to being elevated and given status and seen as significant. And now he's literally watching his dreams die on a cross. He's literally watching everything that he staked his life on, risked his life for, die on a cross. And to add to his guilt a little is the knowledge that maybe if he'd have stood up for Jesus, this wouldn't have happened. Now that's not true. This was ordained to happen. This needed to happen. But Peter's blaming himself, because that's what we do. And he's saying, if only I'd been a better friend, if only I'd had the courage to stand up for Jesus, this wouldn't have happened. He's recognizing his role in this, but the point still remains. My dream is dying on that cross, and there is nothing I can do to save it. Everything I've surrendered my life for is dying, and I can't save it. And he doesn't know what's coming next. Even though Jesus told him that he would die and on the third day be raised again, Peter doesn't have that firmly in mind. He doesn't really understand what Jesus meant by that. So for 3 days, his world goes dark. For 3 days, he thinks there's nothing going to come of all his dreams. For 3 days, all he can do is be present for the men who trusted him, for the men who remain with Jesus. And he doesn't have a lot to offer them. He doesn't have a lot of hope. He doesn't have a lot of guidance to offer them. He doesn't know what to do with himself. He's just waiting for whatever God's going to do. But if that moment didn't come, when Peter's dreams died, the resurrection doesn't come either. And I got so strongly from God this message that this was the gap. This was the biggest hurdle to me being able to succeed in life, was that every time I approached people to engage in a transaction, a money transaction, my dreams and my goals and my desires were in my eyes. And I was looking at people like they were just stepping stones to get the thing that I wanted. And that was putting them off, because nobody wants to be used. That's the truth. That's the reality. Nobody wants to be used. They want to be loved. They want to be valued. They want to be appreciated. But if I step forward and my dreams are in my eyes, I can't do that. I can't value them. I can't see them. I can't appreciate them. I can't commit myself to helping them achieve their dreams. And so I can't make the sale. Because that's what a sale really is. It is a commitment to another individual that you are going to leverage your gifts, your talents, and your abilities in their service to help them achieve their dreams, their desires, their goals. And if you take your eyes off of that prize of their dreams, their desires, and their goals being achieved, it all falls apart. So I was not mature enough at that point in time. I got the message, but I wasn't mature enough at that point in my life to be able to live that message very well. I started working toward that. I began to work on serving with the intention of seeing other people's goals achieved and not with the intention of my own personal gain. But I was still trying to get money out of that equation, so it didn't work very well, right? Because at some point in time, when you got money involved in the transaction, when you're trying to control the outcome, you look at it and you're like, well, hey, I'm not getting what I wanted out of this. And so then you pull back and you stop serving to the highest capacity you've got because you're not seeing the fruit. But the truth about service is that it's a lot like planting seeds in a garden. Only your seed packet's all mixed up. You don't know what kind of seeds you're planting. Some of these seeds could be tomato seeds and they pop up real quick, 60 to 90 days, no problem. Some of these are pumpkin seeds and maybe it takes 120 to 150 days before you start seeing the fruit. And some of these are fruit trees. And you may invest 7 to 10 years before you really start seeing that harvest. But once you do, man, it keeps on coming. Keeps on coming and keeps on coming. And that's why surrender is the third key. Because without surrender, you won't keep serving long enough for the seed to finally crack open and bear fruit. You're trying to control the outcome. You're trying to control the direction from which the fruits come. And this is another part of the truth of it, is that when you serve others, the fruit may not come from the person you served. The fruit may come from somebody who witnessed it, from outside of the system. It may be somebody entirely different, somebody you had no idea was even watching you, who bears the fruit. I've seen this happen in my own life. There was a time when I was listening to something on EWTN, which is Eternal Word Television Network, for those who aren't familiar with it. And it was one of the priests talking, and he was talking about the Eucharist. Now, in Catholic theology, we firmly believe that what Jesus said in John 6 is absolutely true, that he is the bread of life, that his body and his blood are necessary for our salvation, and that we receive that body and that blood at every Catholic Mass. Okay? Now, I was not going to Catholic Mass on a regular basis at this point in my life. And a lot of it was, well, I have to go to work, well, I have to do this, well, I have to do that. So I was making excuses rather than doing the thing I needed to do. And this father said to the listeners, and of course, because I was listening, that was me. He said, if it were $1 million, or a home or a car that was being offered, and all you had to do was show up to get it, you would find a way to be there. And Jesus is so much greater than $1 million or a home or a car. And yet you do not find a way to be there for him. He shows up every day wanting to give you that gift. And every day you choose the world over him. Oh, and that broke my heart to think that I was doing that to him. And so I started going to daily mass. Well, I wasn't doing it for anybody except me. I was doing it to serve Jesus. I was doing it because I recognized I didn't want to be the person who rejected his gift on the altar. And I went there for a few months, and then I go to this women's conference thingy. And this woman that I don't even know comes up to me and goes, "Oh, you're that little angel." And I'm like, "You don't know me, lady. I am no angel." And she said, "Oh, every day you show up at mass and you sing, and it's like the angels are right there with me." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that makes sense, because I do have a gift of song. My voice is beautiful, and I know this because everywhere I go, people tell me so. So it's not me inflating myself. It's me recognizing a gift that God has given me. And when I attend Mass, I leverage that gift, and it brings benefit to other people." And she told me so, that it lifted her up every time I went. And as I was walking out of that conference, it hit me that when you never know who's watching you. You never know who's watching what you're doing. And you never know how you're touching their lives with what you're doing. So it's really important not to give up on service just because the person you serve doesn't seem to appreciate or value it. You don't know who's watching what you're doing. You don't know who else may be seeing that act of service and may change their lives because of it. So then there's the third part of living without money, and it's the hardest part ever. And it's called surrendering the outcome. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look up the parable of the prince. Okay. The rich prince. Yeah, the rich young ruler, Matthew. It's in Matthew 19, I think. So let me go back over here, and we'll go jump into Matthew. This is a guy who has been living with a lot of money, and this is why it's so hard for those who are rich to enter the kingdom of heaven, and that's why I want you to read it with me, right? "And now a man came to him and said, 'Master, who art so good, what good must I do to win eternal life?' He said to him, 'Why dost thou come to me to ask of goodness? God is good, and he only. If thou hast a mind to enter into life, keep the commandments.' 'Which commandments?' he asked. Jesus said, 'Thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, honor thy father and thy mother, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.' And the young man says, 'I've kept all these ever since I grew up. Where is it that I'm still wanting?' Jesus said to him, 'If thou hast a mind to be perfect, go home and sell all that belongs to thee, give it to the poor, and so the treasure thou hast shall be in heaven. Then come back and follow me.'" When he heard this, his reaction was my reaction to being told to give up my quest for money and go serve people without any expectation of getting money in return. When he heard this, the young man went away sad at heart, for he had great possessions. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Believe me, a rich man will not enter God's kingdom easily." And once again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to pass through a needle's eye than for a man to enter the kingdom of heaven when he is rich. All right, and I'm going to explain this in a way that maybe it makes more sense to people. Like I said, money gives you the ability to control the outcome. You control when you get the thing you want, how much of it you get, whether you get it, how you get it, and you're free to do with it as you please. Keep it, discard it, give it away. It's yours. When you begin to surrender the outcome to God, and God bless atheists, they can't escape the money system because they don't have God's help. They don't have confidence that God will provide for them. So control is all they've got. And I feel deeply for them because they're going to be trapped in the money system. And yes, we're going to have to escape that money system if we want to escape the mark of the beast. And I'm afraid I'll talk about that more later, but it's coming very soon. Very soon, much sooner than most people realize. But that surrendering of the outcome is why it is so hard for rich people to enter the kingdom of heaven, because you have to be able to rely 100% on God's providence and allow him to direct the outcome, allow him to control what you get, when you get it, whether you get it, and how it shows up when you get it. Because that's how it's delivered in heaven. The people in heaven aren't controlling God's outcomes. They aren't dictating terms and conditions. This is the difference between a prayer and a spell. A prayer requests things from God in humility, recognizing the limitations of our human nature and our inability to correctly project outcomes. Our inability to see all the variables in the equation that God does. And so we trust that if we're praying for a glass of water, as a priest once told me, and the Lord hands us a empty glass, that it is the empty glass we needed, not the water. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to give you a parable that I went home and wrote after that encounter with the priest. There's this man, and he's walking in the desert, and he's lost, hot, thirsty, just beat down by the sun. And he's praying, and praying, "God, please send me water." And he takes a few steps, trips over a rusted tin can, kicks it as hard as he can, and keeps walking. Still praying, "God, please send me water." Keeps walking. "Please send me water." He's begging. 2 more hours pass, begging, "God, please send me water." Trips over another rusty tin can, kicks that one as hard as he can, and keeps walking. 2 more hours pass. He's been begging this whole time. His throat's growing more and more parched. Till finally he just can't go any further, and he collapses on the desert floor, bawling his eyes out. "God, why didn't you answer me? I prayed and I prayed for water. Why didn't you send me water?" And when he can no longer speak, he's just calm. He hears, "You fool. What were you going to put the water in? And furthermore, did you consider that at some point you might want to eat? What were you going to gather and cook food in? And last, did you want to leave this desert? Because had you have gathered up the rusted tin can that I sent you and used the sand which surrounds you in abundance, You could have created a signal to alert the planes I am sending your way to your presence so they could find you more easily. So if you are through, please get up, gather your tin can, and let's be through with this. We look at the one need, and that's what we're praying for. That's what we're determined to get. And when we don't get that one need met, we decide God hasn't answered our prayer. Well, if you're praying like that, you're not praying, you're casting a spell. You're insisting that God bend his knee to your will. He has no reason to do that. He has no incentive to do that. And moreover, if he did that, it wouldn't serve you very well. Because he can see things you can't. He knows things you don't. So prayer requests in humility what spells demand and arrogance. And that's why the rich have such a hard time. They want to control the outcome. They want to decide what they get, when they get it, whether they get it, how much of it they get when they do get it. Whereas not having money requires you give up all of that. You have to surrender control to the one who has all the answers and can do all the providence, but may choose to say no because he knows that to say yes to your request would either not be beneficial to you or would be inadequate to what you need. So, I say all this to say that if you really want to learn to live without money, you're going to have to learn to develop your relationship with God. You're going to have to learn to steward your gifts, and if you don't know what those are, ask. Ask God to guide you in figuring out what you've got to offer. Ask this community. Let us come together and be a community of people walking toward the Lord with our trust in him and not in money. And that's the temptation, is to make a false idol of money. When you say, I need money to live, that is what you are doing. You are saying that money has the power to save you and that you need money to live. Well, no, you don't. What you need is God. He has everything you need. He is everything you need. And so let's talk about, no pile of money, however lofty it might be, can reach high enough to take you to heaven. There's no coin slot or dollar bill changer in the pearly gates. St. Peter does not accept bribes, and Jesus will not be impressed by the size of your bank account. Okay? And that's the truth. So I'm going to end this today. I'm going to keep talking about money and about service and about stewardship and about the best way to keep your gifts flowing and providence coming your way. And I hope that you found this helpful. And if you did, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. And if you think you know somebody else who could benefit from this, share it with them. I know I've talked a lot about scripture, and I've talked a lot about Jesus, I've talked a lot about God, and maybe you hate all three, but I can't deliver this message. I know of no other way to deliver it than to tell you the truth. And if I were to deny you the truth, that is the greatest evil I could possibly do to you, because it would be a lie. And lies cover the truth and don't save souls. And it's my goal to save as many as possible. So thank you for watching. Have a blessed day. And remember, you have gifts. Put them in service of others and surrender the outcome to the Lord. And know that good will always come when you do those three things.